From what I remember, Stephanie White always speaks at practice. Has this lady gone into hiding? Is she hiding from the media now? Are you hiding from the fans because it was thousands of them booing you? Newsflash. There's nothing Kelsey Mitchell can say. There's nothing Aliyah Boston can say. Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham. There's nothing they can say to get the people to start liking you now. It's over.
That is the question hanging over Indiana right now. Stephanie White usually talks. Suddenly, after thousands of fans made their frustration impossible to ignore, everybody around her seems to be answering for her.
Floor and your team's getting announced and the coach is getting announced, I feel like there's no reason for any of that. I mean, we come out here and we do everything that we can to win, and I think Steph does a great job with us. Like, we love her and we appreciate her, and so to hear that, it was really annoying, honestly, and disrespectful. But for us, I mean, we kept the main thing, and we said we're going to come out here and we're going to get that dub.
Now,
Aliyah Boston could not have been clearer. Inside that locker room, the players believe the booing crossed a line. They respect White, they believe in what she is doing, and Boston called the reaction annoying and disrespectful. And that matters, because there are really two completely different conversations happening at once. The players are talking about their coach as a person, and as the leader they interact with every day. Fans are judging her by what they have watched happen around this team. Those two perspectives do not have to match, but pay attention to what happens next, because Boston defending White was only the beginning. Once another veteran stepped forward, this stopped looking like one player spontaneously backing her coach and started raising a much bigger question. Is Indiana trying to close ranks around Stephanie White while the fan base is moving in the opposite direction? And later, there is another piece of this that goes beyond White entirely, because one national voice made the argument that Indiana's problem is really a symptom of something the entire WNBA has struggled with ever since Caitlin Clark arrived.
Kelsey, what has Steph meant to this group, and heard the boos the other night, and maybe your reaction to that?
It kind of threw me for a loop too. I told her to her face, I said, Coach, this is for you. In terms of just a sense of confidence, a sense of awareness of that you're not alone. And if anybody knows me, it's like I don't play that. So it's like it really hurt my feelings to see her kind of like have emotions in terms of like not feeling valued and not feeling wanted in a place where she has to coach. At the end of the day, this is her job, and so she has to show too. And I think that people don't really recognize that. And I think that it's our job to remind her. It's our cultures. It's our culture, and I think.
Kelsey Mitchell's defense was even more personal. She said the booing threw her for a loop. She told White directly that she was not alone. She talked about seeing emotion from her coach and feeling responsible for reminding her that the locker room still had her back. You can understand that response without agreeing with Mitchell's conclusion about the fans. Players protect people inside their circle. That is normal in professional sports. A coach spends months in meetings, practices, film sessions, airports and locker rooms with these women. Fans experience that coach through decisions, results, press conferences and moments of controversy. They are grading two very different relationships. So when Mitchell says, essentially, this is our culture, and we need to support our coach, she is speaking from inside the building. But fans bought tickets to that building too. And when paying customers decide they do not like how their team is being led, booing is one of the oldest forms of sports criticism there is. It happens to quarterbacks. It happens to managers. It happens to star players. It happens to championship coaches when results go south. The important issue is not whether Boston and Mitchell are allowed to dislike it. Of course they are. The issue is whether Indiana understands what the booing was actually communicating. Because if the organization thinks fans are simply being mean to Stephanie White, they may be missing the grievance entirely. The frustration described in this controversy is connected to moments when supporters wanted a much stronger public response after physical play involving Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham. Whether every fan interpretation of those plays is fair or exaggerated is a separate debate. The perception exists, and once a coach becomes the symbol of that frustration, sending respected players out to defend her does not automatically erase it. That is where this story starts getting uncomfortable for everybody involved.
Now, my thing is, Aliyah, you said there's no reason that should ever happen. Yes, there is a reason that should happen, and the reason happened, which is why she was booed. She has not stood up for the players. She didn't stand up for Caitlin Clark when Alyssa Thomas put her fist on Caitlin Clark's throat. She did not stand up for Sophie Cunningham while Dejanay Carrington gave her a clothesline that sent her into the galaxy. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that is why Stephanie White was booed.
There is the argument from the other side. The criticism is that White did not publicly defend her players forcefully enough during several flashpoint moments, including confrontations involving Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham. That is the standard these fans are applying. Now, coaches do not have to perform outrage every time something happens on the floor. Sometimes protecting a team means speaking privately. Sometimes it means sending film to the league. Sometimes it means refusing to feed a controversy. But there is a price for being restrained when your audience is demanding visible leadership. Fans cannot see private meetings. They cannot hear calls to the league office. They cannot know what gets communicated behind closed doors unless somebody tells them. They see the press conference. They hear the quote. They watch the replay. And if they believe one of their players was treated unfairly, they expect somebody with authority to look into a camera and make it known that the organization noticed. That expectation gets magnified when the player involved is Caitlin Clark, because nothing around Clark operates at normal WNBA scale anymore. Every hard foul becomes a national argument. Every coaching quote gets clipped. Every decision gets examined by people who may never have watched a Fever game before Clark entered the league. That can absolutely become unfair. It can create absurd overreactions, but pretending that environment does not exist does not make it disappear.
What y'all got to do in the locker room, whatever. But from a fan's perspective, the fans are fed up. The fans are fed up with her, Kelsey. Sorry, not sorry. The fans have had enough. They are tired of Stephanie White not standing up for the players. I see why you feel so strongly about it. You're her favorite. She'll let you run around and just shoot a million times if you want to. Not to come at you, but I get why you'd be in favor of Stephanie White. I mean, she pretty much...
And this is where the temperature between the locker room and the audience really separates. The players are saying, we know Stephanie White, we trust her, and you do not understand everything happening internally. The fans are saying, we are judging what we can see. Neither side is likely to talk the other out of its position with one media session. That is why the decision over who speaks becomes important. If White normally addresses reporters at practice and then does not appear during the exact period when criticism is peaking, people are naturally going to notice. That does not prove she is literally hiding. There could be scheduling, media access, or team reasons not established in this transcript, but perception is everything in a controversy like this. The moment people start asking, where is the head coach? Every additional player defending her can accidentally make that question louder. Caitlin Clark speaks, Sophie Cunningham speaks, Aliyah Boston speaks, Kelsey Mitchell speaks, and the audience starts asking why the person at the center of the criticism is not the one answering it herself. If Indiana wants this story to cool down, that is the communications problem it has to solve. Not how to force fans to love White, not how to scold people for booing. The organization has to decide whether it believes the public criticism deserves a direct response from the coach. Because silence only works when the story is losing oxygen. This one clearly was not.
And by the way, you all pay too much attention to social media. You do. You're being scrutinized. You're being scrutinized like a professional sports league. Period. I mean, you're not even close to the level of where like Aaron Rodgers or Pat Mahomes or Travis Kelsey is. You're being scrutinized. And you all have fallen under the weight. You've collapsed under the weight. Now, look, everything that...
Dan Dakich then shifts the argument from Stephanie White to the pressure surrounding the entire league. His point is simple. Scrutiny is part of becoming major league entertainment. That is a harsh message, but it is worth separating from the noise around it. Professional sports fans scrutinize everything. NFL coaches get destroyed over one fourth-down decision. NBA rotations become two-day television debates. Baseball managers get booed before they reach the mound. Athletes with enormous audiences have every facial expression turned into content. The WNBA spent years fighting for more coverage, better visibility, bigger audiences, and greater cultural relevance. Now it has more of all four. The uncomfortable side effect is that the coverage does not arrive as a package containing only praise. It brings criticism. Bad faith criticism too, unfortunately, but also legitimate criticism, tactical criticism, officiating debates, arguments about management, arguments about star treatment, labor questions, roster decisions, and relentless social media reaction. Once millions of people care about the product, millions of people start acting like sports fans. You cannot realistically ask for the first half of that bargain without receiving the second. And that is where Caitlin Clark enters this conversation in a much larger way.
That has come to the WNBA here is because of Caitlin Clark. There was no scrutiny of the Indiana Fever. You know, Sophie Cunningham said, hey, look, when you come to the Indiana Fever, you're under what? No, you're not. When you play with Caitlin Clark, you're under the microphone. Nobody else matters. Nobody.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, Dan.
Dakic's framing is intentionally provocative, but the underlying distinction matters. The Indiana Fever are not merely receiving Indiana Fever attention, they are receiving Caitlin Clark attention. That is different. Clark arrived from Iowa carrying an audience far larger than what a typical incoming player brings into a professional league. People followed her college games, records, rivalries, and tournament runs, and a large portion of that audience followed her directly into the WNBA. That means every person sharing a Fever locker room enters a spotlight that did not exist at the same intensity before. For some players, that means more exposure. For sponsors, that means opportunity. For television partners, it means valuable inventory. For opposing teams, it means larger crowds. For coaches, however, it means something less glamorous. Every mistake becomes louder. White is experiencing that right now. In another market with another roster, a coach getting booed might remain a local sports radio story. With Clark involved, it becomes national commentary. People who never cared about an Indiana coaching decision suddenly have an opinion on one, and that is why the response cannot be, people online are paying too much attention. Attention is the business. That is the product everybody wanted to grow. The real test is learning how to operate once that attention becomes uncomfortable.
You're so worried about sharing, well, we're human beings. No. You wanted the attention. You wanted to be a big girl league. You wanted to put yourself on the same level of other professional basketball, football, baseball, hockey, whatever leagues across the country. So you are now because of one woman, Caitlin Clark, and her popularity coming out of Iowa, the way she plays, the way she conducts herself. And y'all now are crying about it because you haven't handled it.
There is the central charge. The league wanted to be treated like the other major professional leagues. Now that its biggest star has helped bring enormous attention, critics believe the WNBA sometimes reacts as though that attention itself is the problem. This is the part that should matter far beyond whether somebody likes Stephanie White, because star-driven leagues always create imbalance. LeBron James never received ordinary coverage. Tiger Woods never received ordinary golf coverage. Serena Williams never received ordinary tennis coverage. A superstar creates an ecosystem around the sport where that athlete is disproportionately responsible for attracting casual viewers. That can irritate longtime fans. It can irritate other players. It can produce lazy media coverage, where one name swallows everything else. But a league's job is not to complain that its star is too popular. Its job is to convert the attention into lasting interest in everybody else. That means somebody tunes in for Clark and discovers Kelsey Mitchell. They notice Aliyah Boston. They watch Aja Wilson. They learn rivalries. They start following standings. They buy tickets even when Indiana is not in town. That is how a superstar becomes a gateway, instead of a dependency. But to accomplish that, the league and its teams have to survive the chaos that accompanies growth, and growth is chaotic. New fans do not know old norms. Old fans resent new narratives. Players get asked repetitive questions. Every physical confrontation gets magnified. Every quote gets interpreted through competing fan bases. The answer cannot be to eliminate scrutiny. The answer is to become better at handling it. This brings us back to White, because she is sitting directly where all those forces collide.
Not you, Sophie Cunningham or Caitlin Clark. You as a league have handled it for shit.
Since they dropped the ball. When Kathy, it was a fireable offense in Caitlin Clark's rookie year for Kathy to come out and say, oh, we weren't prepared for this. You didn't see this coming?
That comment about being unprepared is important, because preparation is really what this whole argument comes down to. Nobody can perfectly anticipate how one athlete will reshape a league's attention economy, but once the change is obvious, adaptation becomes mandatory. Indiana knows by now that everything around Clark travels. The WNBA knows it, opposing coaches know it, players know it, media departments definitely know it, so controversies cannot be managed as though they will remain inside a traditional WNBA news cycle. A hard foul can become a national clip before the post-game interview begins. A sentence from a coach can be dissected by hundreds of creators within hours. A crowd reaction becomes another storyline before the next game. That does not mean teams should surrender to every viral demand. In fact, chasing social media can create even bigger problems. Organizations need standards that remain consistent, whether the angry side has 10,000 followers or 10 million. But consistency requires clarity. If Indiana believes White handled those controversial moments correctly, explain why. If the team believes people are mischaracterizing what happened, say that. If White believes there are better ways to advocate for her players than publicly attacking opponents or officials, she can articulate that philosophy. Those are arguments people can debate. What does not work nearly as well is allowing a vacuum to develop while other people repeatedly answer around the person being criticized, because a vacuum gets filled with speculation.
It's not about one player. A shot at Caitlin Clark. The players that played with Dejounte Carrington in Caitlin Clark's first year, after she elbowed her from behind, or Kennedy Carter, after he elbowed her from behind, cheered. That's what you have. That's you doing it. Hell, you have a league that can't decide what a woman is. Now think about that. Nobody is creating these narratives, young ladies, except for you all. Period. And you all are upset because...
And now the argument expands into history. Dakich points to previous controversies from Clark's early WNBA experience and argues that the league helped create many of the narratives it later complained about. You do not have to accept every example exactly as he frames it to understand the broader warning. When a league becomes polarized around a superstar, inconsistency is gasoline. Fans remember old plays. They remember quotes from opposing coaches. They remember Olympic debates. They remember officiating decisions. Then the next controversy does not begin at zero. It begins with an entire archive of grievances already loaded into the conversation. That is what appears to be happening with Stephanie White. People are not merely responding to one night of basketball. They are carrying accumulated frustration into the arena. That is how a coach gets booed even when her own players believe she deserves support. And that finally gets us to the question held from the beginning. Why are Boston and Mitchell defending White so passionately while portions of the fan base are rejecting the message because they are arguing about two different jobs? The players are defending Stephanie White, the coach they know internally. The fans are evaluating Stephanie White, the public representative of a team built around the most scrutinized player in women's basketball. Inside the locker room, loyalty matters. Outside the locker room, symbolism matters. When Clark takes contact and fans believe she was not defended strongly enough, White becomes the symbol. When Cunningham takes a hard hit and fans want outrage, White becomes the symbol. When frustration with officiating, physicality, or league leadership builds, the head coach closest to the league's most visible star can become the easiest person for an audience to hold responsible. That may not always be fair, but it is real. And once a coach reaches that point, teammates praising her character cannot fully solve the problem because the audience was never questioning whether her players liked her. They were questioning whether she represents them the way they want their coach to represent them. Those are fundamentally different disputes.
I've said this before. I say this again. This is a Dakich family mantra. Be careful what you wish for. You wished to be considered a major league. Well, because of Caitlin Clark, you're a major league, and you can't handle it.
That's the problem. Y'all wanted everything except y'all can't.
That is where this stands. The boos have become bigger than one rough crowd reaction. They exposed a disconnect between how Indiana's players view Stephanie White and how a vocal part of the Fever audience views her. Boston says the reaction was disrespectful. Mitchell says White is not alone. Critics say fans are responding to a pattern they believe has gone unanswered. And Dakic's broader argument is that this is exactly what happens when a league finally receives the level of attention it spent years asking for. Now comes the choice. Should Fever fans back off because the players have made it clear they support Stephanie White? Or are fans completely within their rights to keep booing until they see the kind of leadership they expect from the head coach? Pick a side in the comments, because those two positions are colliding right now. And if Stephanie White speaks next, what she says could determine whether this cools down or gets even louder. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me which side of that line you're on.
Seem to handle what comes with the superstar like Caitlin Clark. Stephanie White is out hiding like Osama bin Laden somewhere. She's hiding. The lady is hiding. This is crazy. She got to get it together, man. Stop sending people to do damage control. Y'all just sent Aliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell to do damage control for Stephanie White, and it's not going to work. I think the fans are going to boo her ass again tomorrow. What says you? Get down in the...
Be careful what you wish for is the line that ties the whole story together. The WNBA wanted Major League attention. Caitlin Clark accelerated it. And Major League attention does not ask permission before becoming uncomfortable. The biggest mistake Indiana could make now is treating the fans themselves as the problem. You do not have to agree with booing your own coach. Boston clearly does not. Mitchell clearly does not. But organizations should still listen to what a crowd is communicating underneath the noise. Are they angry about losses? Are they angry about rotations? Do they believe players are not being protected? Do they think the coach's public messaging does not match the intensity they want? Those are different problems requiring different answers. And there is another important distinction. A coach should not manage a team by referendum. If 10,000 people want one lineup, and White's basketball judgment says another lineup gives Indiana the best chance to win, she has to coach the team, not the comments section. If fans demand a public attack on another player, and White believes that would hurt her team or create unnecessary league discipline, she should not perform outrage just to win applause. Leadership becomes meaningless if every decision is outsourced to whoever is angriest online. But accountability runs in the opposite direction too. A head coach in professional sports cannot expect immunity from public criticism because her players personally support her. Both things can be true at once. The locker room can love Stephanie White. The fans can still believe she has handled key moments poorly. That tension is not evidence that one side must be lying. It is professional sports, and ultimately, White has the most powerful tool available to change the conversation, her own voice, and the team's performance. If she addresses the criticism directly, explains her philosophy, and Indiana starts winning at the level fans expect, boos can disappear very quickly. Sports audiences are emotional, but they are also incredibly responsive to results. If the frustration continues, and White remains absent from the public conversation, then every press appearance from another player risks being interpreted as another layer of protection. That is why the next media availability matters more than another social media argument. Does Stephanie White step in front of the questions herself? Does she defend her approach? Does she acknowledge why people are frustrated without surrendering control of her team? That would tell us far more than another teammate saying she loves her coach.